Hello and welcome to another episode of Once Upon a Time in Some Guy's Parents' House. We're back in Some Guy's Parents' House. That's me, Mike, the presenter, and my co-presenters, Jools and Rob. Welcome, gentlemen.
Greetings.
Hello.
And today we are going to talk about a very small film that came out recently to only minor fanfare, Avengers Infinity War.
Wait, not Tremor 6?
Well, Tremor 6 was the obvious suggestion, but we thought too many people would have said too many things about it.
I did all my notes on Tremor 6.
Ooh.
Oh.
All right, I'll throw this one to Rob first then. Rob, what did we think of Avengers Infinity War? Perhaps you could give me something you liked and something you didn't like.
Sure, I really liked the performance of the character Burt Gummer. No, okay. Things I liked. I really liked I think Josh Brolin's performance, the mocap stuff, really held everything together. I have a favourite bit, but we could go around the room first if you want, or I could.
All right, something you didn't like, maybe.
Go back, it's lyrical. I think I switched off a little bit with the Wakanda, the large battle scenes. I really liked all the other stuff that it has to offer. Really, I quite like Black Panther, but just when it got to those long, the wider battle scenes, I think I wasn't as interested.
All right, Jules, have you managed to find some non-Tremor 6 notes?
I'll try and just interweave. We'll see where we go. No cat notebook today, I'm afraid.
Sad.
I know. I always wanted a cat notebook growing up. My parents they wouldn't get me one unless I fed it every day. I didn't one day, and then it stopped moving. No, I thought this. I thought this movie was great. I really enjoyed it. With all the hype and 10 years of backstory and character setups and God, it's such a ridiculous amount of characters it had to juggle. I went into this film fully expecting something that was going to be really messy and overly long and. But at least adequately entertaining in that very homogenous Marvel movie sort of way, in which they all are to some extent, with like a couple of exceptions here and there.
Sure.
But I was left very impressed by a film that, to be honest, I'm amazed can even exist. It's this filmic equivalent of a gigantic comic book crossover event, but it's executed to the degree where it hits everything I believe the intended audience that this movie is after. This is a film that's plotted structured from Thanos' perspective. He is, in a way, the protagonist.
Yes.
Which is interesting. I read a lot of people online saying, oh, this is plotted from his protagonist, he's the hero, and it's not quite as simple as that.
I was rooting for him.
There were certain bits where I was thinking like, this guy...
He has a point.
He does have a nutsack for a chin, and I do like that in a man. But it's there's elements to his arc where it actually, I thought it kind of, this is going to sound insane, but I thought it actually paralleled Michael Corleone's arc in the first Godfather film, in the way it plays out. But if I start picking out certain reasons why, I would definitely spoil this film.
As the door shut on Gamora.
As the door shut on Gamora. And it's just like, oh god.
I think my biggest negative with this film, and it probably does relate to my general low investment in this franchise, was that the film, I think, naturally enough, with so many characters, has to spread its storyline and its characters across these like a few threads which are kind of interconnected. Like there isn't a very complicated plot here. It's really like Thanos is trying to do his thing and everyone else is trying to stop him.
It's very simple.
But you still end up getting maybe 3 different plots running at once with a few different characters. And I will admit that about an hour and a half into this film, whenever it changed scene, it would take me about 5 seconds before I'd be thinking, right, who are these people? Where are they, and what are they actually doing?
What year is it? Who's the president?
Yeah, exactly.
Have you been taking your meds?
It's I forgot that day.
It's weird. I'm willing to overlook that because I agree with you. I had that 5 minutes sort of. Wait, hang on a minute. All right, it's the Guardians. Okay, now I'm. Oh no, wait, it's not the Guardians. It's some of them, and then there's maybe Thor's here, and you're mixing parts of all the universes. But the fact that it only took me a few bits to just think, okay, I'm on board now.
It's impressive.
It's impressive. I'm amazed it can even work in the slightest sense.
It speaks well of the editing, and I have a point which might be closer to the wider point about the cinematic universes, but essentially I think really if there's a kind of secret source that Marvel have at the moment, it's possibly the editing. And yes, the Russo Brothers were involved in quite a lot of the sort of tentpole big MCU films, but there is a common thread with the editor, which is Jeffrey Ford. He kind of feels a bit typecast as the Marvel editor these days, but yeah, he's there from the script stage.
Right.
He's on set, and then when everyone goes home, he's still there. He's there during previs, and it sounds like there was an interview with him about the first Avengers film. The whole sequence with the helicarrier goes down. That in the script that was originally linear. All of the events that happened kind of linear, and that seems like a simple thing, but he used intercutting to make the whole scene completely. So he's restructuring loads of things, and there was an article, it was a huge article on him editing Infinity War, but he said one of his. There's one quote here. He says he does not prioritise action over character development, which I thought you might find interesting as the writer.
I think I completely agree. Yeah.
But is there any character development in this movie? I would say
I'd
that
argue
was
Thanos is the one that has the character
maybe,
development.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that maybe naturally enough, with this many characters in, I thought you've got the taste of all of these different characters.
Yeah.
They're correctly represented on the screen,
exactly.
but nobody really changes in this film. Like there's nothing really that compelling about anybody's arc apart from maybe Thanos.
I would argue it parallels more a television show in having the very small, slight arcs that you have, especially not even just in like serialized shows, but even you have like even episodic television shows where characters really can't change very much, but you just change such a small sliver of their character, and usually it's something like an outlook on life is they realise maybe they were wrong about that and they should change something else. So this felt more like taking that into account, and I wonder if that comes from things like, I don't know how much the Russo brothers are involved in the general story, but they come from television. They started directing Arrested Development, went on to do Community, doing the paintball episodes, which most people know from because they're basically action movies in 20 minutes. But them coming from television, I wonder if that's why they're used to being able to tell these stories told on a smaller frame, but when it's extrapolated to something much larger with a movie like this, where you need a smaller told character story because it's just events, it's just set pieces.
Yes.
You feel at home and comfortable with the characters. I think possibly the Guardians team are the most relatable, and it's interesting because some of those characters you'd think would be quite similar to each other if they run up against each other. I noticed with Thor, he's becoming more of a kind of quippier character since Ragnarok.
Since Ragnarok, he's become very interesting.
And he interacts with Peter Quill, Star-Lord, and he kind of reverts back, in that scene, to the original Thor to play that interplay. And
he was the butt of the jokes in the first Thor film. And
Quill's jealous of him, and they all look up to him. And it actually that scene also reminded me of if you know your Red Dwarf. Definite vibes of Ace Rimmer.
Yes.
Because there's an episode called Dimension Jump where he turns up, and I'm thinking
that's interesting. Yeah.
This feels similar.
No, that never occurred to me.
Yeah. I know, I can see it now, but I didn't. That's brilliant.
Wow.
What a god.
I feel like we're segueing quite neatly into what I'd like for us to discuss now, which is how much of all of what we're saying about this film, in terms of how the audiences see it, in terms of how the writers create it and the editors, and how much the way we criticise it comes from the fact that it is part of this massive cinematic universe. I mean, I feel that, for example, you can't really have this no characters having these arcs unless you've got all of this backstory and all of the other films, and you know that it's going on to something else as well. Yeah, definitely. It would be a very dissatisfying film if this was just the only film.
If it was a standalone thing,
On one hand, we do give these films a lot more leeway when it comes down to these event films. But when we also give them, even when it comes down to things like later sequels within individual franchises, like I think the worst example is something like Civil War, which is the third Captain America film. It relies so heavily on elements of the shared universe that you would have no idea if you only saw that film in isolation, and the movie itself would not hold up as well narratively. The entire central conflict and the conceit dies before it even comes out the starting gate. And the filmmakers, they know this. And, the amount of money they're making, it bloody works.
That's interesting.
And I wonder how much of it also comes down to the audience as well, how much we allow them to do these sorts of things.
You feel like you're missing out, don't you?
Well, exactly. This is the thing. You watch Thor Ragnarok, okay? That depends heavily on the second Avengers film. But if you go into Thor Ragnarok having not seen the second Avengers film,
which I did, I have not seen the second Avengers film and did watch Thor Ragnarok.
I think the majority of people who would go who would go into Thor Ragnarok and come out saying, they didn't understand half the stuff going on with, Thor Ragnarok was hilarious, but that green bloke, what the hell who was that? What was going on with him? And you don't come out, I don't think people come out of the cinema saying that because they know this is a shared universe. The audience is more like to say,
Oh, I'm
Yeah,
missing,
shit, that was my
it's
fault.
my fault. Right, yeah.
You know,
okay.
I didn't see Avengers 2. Of
Well,
course, the third film of the fourth
I've
franchise
encountered
didn't
this-
make any sense to me.
I've been in a conversation in a pub once, and someone has been talking to me about the Marvel universe, and they're obsessed with it. And somebody else has come into the conversation and isn't up to speed. And the other person talks as if, sort of side eyes them and sort of considers it almost dereliction of duty that you haven't seen. I mean, okay, that's probably an exception, but
I don't see.
how could you not have seen?
Weirdly enough, I think
Ant-Man.
the majority of people that go to that watch these films, and I do include myself in this because I've seen every bloody one of them, and I know,
Sure.
and I know as much as I
Particularly
enjoy
often.
them, I'll continue seeing them, and it's not because they're great films. I mean, some of them I've really loved, but the majority of them I thought, no, that was alright.
You want all the ingredients of the story.
Yeah.
Going back to the point you were saying, sort of, whether or not it matters that you've seen all of the others. I mean, I've only seen half of them, roughly.
Right, okay,
I think I've
yeah.
seen about half of them. And so I saw Thor Ragnarok, for example, without having seen Avengers 2, and so, okay, Hulk is on this other planet that he gets to. And to be honest, I just didn't really care. I was like, oh, Hulk's here.
But how much of your experience has been lessened by the fact that you haven't seen all the rest of this universe, and that you yourself have said, but that's what these films are. They're a genre in and of themselves, and therefore are you to blame for your
Well,
not seeing
it just doesn't
them?
bother me at all because because I'm not that invested.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't care that much why Hulk is on this planet.
Do you think that they do enough to tell the story without you getting lost on the way?
Just about.
Yeah.
One criticism I would have of this cinematic universe format, which comes directly from Avengers: Infinity War, and this isn't a spoiler because it's right at the beginning of this film. But essentially, the end of Thor Ragnarok, the last scene of Thor Ragnarok is let's save the people of Asgard because Asgard is being destroyed, and they have this huge fight scene, and it's really important at the end of that film that they have saved the people of Asgard.
Well, they make a
and what
point that
happens right at the
Asgard
beginning
is
of this film?
Sure.
They're all dead. First shot, most of
Well,
them
it's
are
like
just
it's
dead.
half of them, isn't it? It's the
And,
thing that they say, yeah.
And I just think, oh right, if I were to go back to the end of Thor Ragnarok now and watch that again, I'd be thinking, oh good, I'm glad he saved them for the 20 minutes it takes for Thanos to catch up and kill them all.
It's almost like one of those old serials. It's like a cliffhanger in that respect. So, I mean, when you think of serials, you might think of the 30s and 50s sort of, or the sound era ones where they were mostly like for kids essentially.
Yeah.
But during the 1910s, that sort of era, they were actually the main attraction. Some of them were like 45 minutes. They were almost like between a one reel and a feature. And some studios weren't even sure the features were going to take off. But serials, it's like 3D, isn't it? It's another thing that's come around. Maybe this isn't the modern day serial. I was throwing it out there.
Another thought I had about this film, we're 18 films into this series now. We're getting to the end of something like 36 hours.
36 hours, every 2 hours.
If it was 2 hours, and some of these are probably longer than 2 hours. So if we put that in television, language, we're kind of season finale of season 2 of a 22 episode, 50 minutes to an hour long episode,
right. Or 50 series of 40 Towers.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is the end of season 50 of 40 Towers.
But you'd be thinking these films have been going for 10 years, so effectively it's 10 seasons of a television show at the work rate at which one would make these things.
I guess so. I think that's.
But you're going by running time.
I'm going by running time. I'm going by actually
the time we've invested as an audience.
Narratively, the time that the plot has actually had to move and change, and the characters have had to change. We're talking about something like the end of a second season, and this film would basically be the last 3 episodes of the end of the second season. And I do think that consuming the plot in that way would be much more satisfying. I was thinking during this 2.5 hours, I was thinking 40 minutes of this at a time, I would think this was brilliant entertainment.
Right.
But 2.5 hours, I think it's a bit fatiguing, and it's a bit... It sort of just starts to wash over me, and after about an hour and 45 minutes, I thought I'd actually just kind of like a break from this now.
And if cinemas do... I mean, if we do see the fall of cinemas, I hope we don't, and we get that kind of dialing in your blockbusters as they are released, then maybe they'll start splitting them up.
I agree with you. Long running times always kill me in cinema. It's extremely rare for me to sit in a 2.5 hour film and think this deserves to be 2.5 hours, or if it does, not to at least want a break. I always want a half break because of natural attention spans. But I wonder how much film times and things like that have increased because we're so used to on-demand serialized television now, where people marathon things.
Yes.
So the cinema audience is actually their attentions. It's being responded to by the studios thinking they should take longer films.
It's learned behaviour.
It's learned behaviour.
Because if
They've
there's
been
one
trained.
if there's one truth we know about people today, it's that their attention spans are longer than they used to be. All right, let's sum up our thoughts. Jules, I'm going to ask you first, please.
Well, I've got one last point to make about the cinematic universe discussion thing.
Go ahead.
Now, there's something that they've created with these cinematic universe films. I think that Marvel have been very smart about. It's very clever, and it's these post-credit scenes. Now, what they've done here is they've created this sort of addictive nature to the storytelling. And where even if you don't like the film itself, there's part of you that stays to the end just because you want to know how it plays into the larger picture. I wonder how many people would probably never go see some of these films in these franchises based on, just based on the trailers or because the superhero doesn't particularly interest them.
Yeah.
I mean, God, some of these we've seen, like, I definitely wouldn't have gone to see Black Panther
So
otherwise.
it's completionism almost.
Yeah, but you do, because you want to feed the addiction of knowing more about this extended universe and being primed for this post-credit scene story that you've been drip-fed for 10 years and 20 films. And I find that really fascinating. I sat through Ant-Man and I enjoyed it, but then at the end, all I get is a tease for Ant-Man 2. And I start to feel like the film has failed me to a certain degree, even though the film itself
You wanted it to
stands
tease
up completely
Captain
fine.
America 3 or
Yeah,
something.
or whatever the next one was. I can't even remember what even bloody order it was in now. But the fact that it only teased the next film in that sequel franchise rather than the overall picture of the
What is
Thanos
this,
arc
Iron Man
made
1?
me feel really disappointed.
One thing I will say is that the audience that I was with on Tuesday evening were very, very much into this. There were people in tears during this movie at various times, people shouting out at the screen, really following along with it. And I have not been to a film that had that kind of effect on an audience for years, I don't think.
Well, that is a surprising reaction for Sex and the City too. I did enjoy the film. I'm not necessarily going to revisit it, but I think that seems to be a bit of a trend for these Marvel films for me. So I've got a new segment. It's called Corrections Corner. One of our listeners has been in touch.
We have listeners.
Yeah, I know. I'm surprised as well. None other than Rory Falk, director of Tomb Raider.
Did he really direct Tomb Raider though? I mean,
shots fired.
Or were it more just events that occurs?
He writes, Dear Once Upon, I love the podcast, especially that Rob guy. However, last episode, you pronounced my name wrong. It's not Rory Falk, it's Uwal Utaug. Thanks, guys. Kind regards, Rory Falk.
Well, that's all we have time for this week. Thank you very much for tuning in to another episode of Once Upon a Time in Some Guy's Parents' House. Some guy will be back with his friends to talk about another film very soon.
Good night.
Good night.
Uwal Utaug.
Uwal Utaug. Is he in the Mos Eisley
Uwal
Cantina?
Utaug.